Last summer when I was teaching the practical theology intensive at the Church Divinity School of the Pacific in Berkeley, I assigned my students a book by Richard Beck entitled Unclean, Meditations on Purity, Hospitality, and Mortality. It's a brilliant piece of theological reflection that begins in Beck's area of research, which is in disgust psychology. His premise begins with the psychological basis for the way that people interpret the scriptures and the way that they make church together. Disgust makes people naturally want to exclude rather than include. And I think his is a penetrating insight, and it's slightly gross. Let me give you an example. I'm getting over a cold. Those are words that I wish I could have said last Sunday, but it was not so. Last Sunday, I was in the second or third day of feeling sick, which means that at some point in the 7 days before, I welcomed a virus into my body. Wikipedia, the last resort of a sick man at 2 o'clock in the morning, states, well over 200 virus strains are implicated in the cause of the common cold. It just took one to catch me and make me sick. My late night cruise through Wiki told me that viruses spread through the air, which means that surrounding you right now are a vast number of these creatures, each wanting to be welcomed into your bodies. This will happen when one of them lands on some suitable surface that you will then encounter. You will be the vector for welcoming the virus that will cause you to have a cold, unless you aren't. You may be one of the lucky ones who don't have to welcome the unwanted stranger. Of course, Wikipedia assured me viruses aren't really alive. They lack the ability to reproduce without a host cell. The bad news is that they only come to life because of us, because of our bodies, which is the good news for the virus. How many species are living inside of you right now? It's a kind of nasty question. It's the sort of question Beck would ask. According to people who know better than I, there are around 30,000 species living in your body right now. These same smart folks say that these little living things, microbes, are all through your bodies. They say that between 3 and 10 times as many microbial cells in your body exist as well as human cells. There are 100 trillion cells in your body that do not have your DNA. Not to mention the microanimals that occupy the surface of your body. Did you know there is a distinct kind of mite that lives on your eyelash? Which at last raises the question that captures me both physiologically and theologically. Who is your body? Who is our body? Around the year 63 AD, the writer of the letter to the Hebrews told the Jesus movement in Jerusalem that there was a better way to live than the one they had before they received enlightenment. He wrote, "Continue to love each other like brothers and sisters. Remember always to welcome strangers, for by doing this some people have entertained angels without knowing it. Keep in mind those who are in prison as though you were in prison with them, and those who are being badly treated, since you too are in the body. It's a kind of viral infection of the Jesus movement that continues to infect us today. This was, of course, a sort of radical innovation in the way that the first audience lived. Instead of being separated by class or condition of life, the people were welcoming just anyone into their fellowship. Rich and poor, male and female, enslaved and slave-owning people occupied the same body. This and all the other examples of communal life in the epistles are the reasons that we strive so hard to welcome people here at St. Gregory's. It's why churches are all supposed to welcome strangers. And the truth is that many people welcome strangers with the same enthusiasm as I welcome a cold virus. Many would just as soon endure a week's illness than embrace a stranger who walks through the door. Still others welcome strangers as though they really were angels. That is, they reserve a kind of overbearing attention for strangers that serves some purpose other than welcoming them as sisters and brothers. Angels, after all are easier than family members. They're more mythologically removed. But the truth is, neither approach, either avoidance or smothering, is a particularly good idea. There are good sociological reasons for both. Richard Beck writes in his book these words: "From childhood, humans are adept in sorting people according to purported discussed properties. The odd, lonely, and weak on the playground become the smelly, the creepy, and the disgusting." The sad news of being human is that we are raised to fear strangers, which is one of the reasons that we have survived as a species. The same sense that keeps me from eating spoiled food is transferred to the way that I deal with the unknown other. If I'm disgusted by the stranger, then there must be a perfectly good reason for it. One that, if I don't pay attention to it, will result in our destruction. It's a lesson so ingrained in us that we have to consciously unlearn it. I think that's what the writer of the letter to the Hebrews had in mind. That there is a way to get beyond my disgust, my fear of the stranger. If I can begin to imagine the stranger as I am, as my body is, then there is a way out of that fear. Instead of being motivated by fear, I can learn to trust that the other person, the stranger, is being put into my life to show me something more about the world, about myself, and about God. And of course, it's easy to say that this is a simple thing to do. But it isn't, not for many of us. Welcoming strangers requires something more than wishful thinking. Welcoming strangers requires us to put our trust in what we most deeply hold to be true. Welcoming the stranger comes with no guarantee that we will not be harmed. It only promises that we will be changed in the encounter. Welcoming strangers calls us to be courageous, loving, and above all, servants to one another. Then there are the others who welcome strangers as though they really are angels. This is as much a disservice as avoiding them like the plague. The strangers that we encounter in our lives are not put there for us to romanticize. Strangers are real people. They are complex, as are we all. The letter to the Hebrews makes the point of saying that when we extend hospitality to strangers, we are not in control of the outcome. If we are welcoming them as angels, the writer says, we will be unaware of it. The point is not to fetishize strangers. The point is to be completely authentic in welcoming them. Again, Richard Beck writes this: the call to hospitality is not simply a call to charity, but it is rather a call to remake the heart, my emotional stance toward otherness. Welcoming the stranger calls us to be vulnerable, emotionally present, and above all, servants to one another. The blessing that we may come to in welcoming strangers is about our transformation. It's about our being changed from one way of being in the world to another. Fundamentally, it is about recognizing that the life we enjoy is not ours alone, but is shared with all people. So the question, who is your body, is more accurately asked, who are your body? Because we are, each one of us, more than the self that we know ourselves to be. We are a complex of the other. We are a complex of those who are known and of those we have not yet met. This may not be the body that you want. You may want the comfort of autonomy, the ease of not needing anyone else, and I understand that, because I do not always want to admit that I am a complex of relationships. Well, the relationships I have are both simple and complicated. And too often I just want to stand apart, not needing any of you, not needing anyone. My experience is that this is not a good place. The shadow of autonomy is always loneliness. The sadness of independence is always arrogance. The truth is, I need you even when I don't want you. I need to be reassured that my body and yours are one, that we are one holy body. Hebrews says this: remember always to welcome strangers, for by doing this, some people have entertained angels without knowing it. That line is, of course, an allusion to the story in Genesis of Abraham welcoming strangers into his camp, feeding them, and receiving the unlikely news that he and his postmenopausal wife will soon have a child. It would be great if extending hospitality to strangers would always come in a one-size-fits-all package, but it isn't. When we practice hospitality, it can't be with an expectation of receiving something predictable in return. The very best we can hope for is to be changed in the encounter. Once I was a stranger in this place, and by some odd quirk of the eternal, the person who welcomed me into the building is sitting right there, Scott King. I walked in here on a Saturday afternoon after a wedding with my friend Andy Doyle, looking for something more about church. I was a stranger in a strange land, both internally and externally. And I was welcomed in a way that made me feel as if I was at both valuable and meh. As though my presence in this community might change everything, and we'll see what happens. In other words, I was treated like a living human being. And today, like most days at St. Gregory's, we have the opportunity to welcome strangers. My dear friends, my dear fellow Gregorians, please don't avoid them like a virus or fetishize them like angels. Just recognize that they are us, that we are one body. We are one body because it is God who is calling us all to newness of life. We are one body because God is making us new Every day, every moment, we are one body. And it remains to be seen who else is us, who our body are.